to the May meeting of the Utilities Advisory Commission. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call, and I'll call on people on the Zoom screen first before people here. Commissioner Scharf.
Here, present.
Commissioner Bowie.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Johnston.
Present.
Commissioner Metz.
Present.
Vice Chair Siegel. Here. And I'm here as well. So we have all 7 commissioners, which is great. Agenda review and revisions. I don't believe we have any revisions to the posted agenda. So we can go straight to oral communications in case there are any members of the public wishing to address the commission on anything that is not on today's agenda. Is there anyone wanting to speak?
If so, please raise your hand in the Zoom webinar or press *9 if you're calling in. Looks like no hands raised.
All right, thank you very much. So we can then turn to approval of the minutes. Are there any suggested changes or revisions to the minutes? I thought I saw a hand flash by.
Sorry, Chair, that was me. I just wanted to highlight something that was not related to the agenda. And it actually has nothing to do with the UAC. I just want to express a note of gratitude to the city of Palo Alto. I've recently begun commuting back to work, but fortunately, given the work has changed my office location, I am now at the end of San Antonio Road in Palo Alto, and I am biking to work over the brand new bike bridge. And I must confess, it is nothing but a pleasure. So congratulations to the city of Palo Alto for making our city a very, very bike-friendly city. I have thoroughly enjoyed my mornings. So I do want to express that note of thanks.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Smith. Back to the minutes. Are there any suggested revisions to the minutes or any comments? Commissioner Johnston.
So I think there are a couple of small typos on page 4. I guess it's the third full paragraph where it says honk remarked. I think it should be honker, John Honker. And then on page 5, on the second full paragraph, where it talks about the last sentence, the traditional board band, I think that should be broadband.
Good eye catch. Thanks for catching those. Are there any additional? Oh, okay. I am not used to that.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so when we're in chambers, each of us has this little thingy here because we don't have the yellow hand on Zoom. This is pre-Zoom. So that indicates that myself or Vice Chair Siegel or Commissioner Metz might like to participate on an item. Okay, so with respect to the minutes, on page 9, it says that I encourage the UAC to align its break with council. I think I encourage the UAC to consider staff when they were contemplating when it, so it was just a minor thing.
Could you say again what page and what paragraph that was?
Yeah, page 9, and it was in the second paragraph. So I just encourage the UAC to realize that staff is able to take their vacations when we take our break. I was attempting to be careful not to give you instruction, and I just want to be sure that's reflected.
Gotcha. Thank you. Are there any other comments or suggested revisions? I've got 2 things lit up now. And they say, my 2 buttons say coup and stone.
Okay, so what you want to do is after I talk, you push that lighted button and it goes away. And then Lauren, you want to flip yours? Yours isn't working. Yes, it's working.
All right.
Okay, Phil, you want to practice yours? it's a little metal flipper thing.
Thank you,
underneath.
anybody who's watching, for bearing with us as we do this little training session.
Greg, Commissioner Sharp also could give this training, having sat here for many years. All right, you're just going to have to lean over. This is why we're redoing the council chambers at some point.
Yeah. All right. So then back to the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as with the suggested revisions?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Commissioner Scharf moves and Commissioner Johnston seconds. All right, to the vote. Commissioner Scharf,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel. Abstain. And I vote to approve as well. So they pass. And I don't think we have any unfinished business from last time. So that brings us to our Utilities Director report. Director Batchelor.
Good evening, Chair Purcell. Thank you. Commissioners and Councilmember Cormack. Welcome. A few things of note tonight. Earth Day event on Friday, the 22nd. Utilities shared a tent with zero waste at the Stanford Healthcare event. Interacting with doctors and nurses and other Stafford employees who came by and actually played some games with the boards that we had out there. And then Mayor Burt also stopped by the event and gave a talk to the city climate goals. Later that day, CPAU hosted a table at the March and Rally of Earth event in front of the City Hall, King Plaza. Speakers included Congresswoman Ann Eshru, Assembly Member Mark Berman, and Mayor Burt. Then all stopped by at the table and asked about some incentive programs to take home and information materials on effective devices. The next day, on Saturday, April 23rd, CPU partnered with the local nonprofit Acteria to host its first e-bike test ride event, EV Expo at Mitchell Park. Several local volunteers brought their e-bikes to show and answer any of the questions. We also had 3 different models of EVs out there. More than 100 people attended the event, and we provided over 50 test rides. It was hosted again by Acteria, well attended by the community. And if any of the commissioners are involved in the neighborhood groups or communities that they were interested in hosting a neighborhood EV expo, please let us know, and we can get you signed up for that. Some upcoming events this Saturday, May 7th, we have the Mayfair Parade again. It's the 98th year that the fair and parade will be in place. It's in the university downtown area. And then I believe that all of you received an email and the flyer for this coming Saturday. On May 12th from 7 to 8, discover how to maximize effectiveness of EV charging. Learn about buying and installing home chargers, how to find and use public chargers, charger speeds and costs, rebates, charging options for residents and apartment condos. A little bit of news on our hydro update. After a promising start, it's now clear that the 21-22 year water year will be third straight very dry year in California. That's the 26. Totals in Northern California and Central are about 20 to 30% below average for the time of the year. Being above the California standards is usually between 30 and 50. So we are getting to be in that bad situation for our hydro. As a result, Palo Alto's hydro projections for 22 and the 23 are now very low, and they're projected to produce around 245 in the fiscal year, which is about 52% of the long-term average levels of hydro output that we'll need. Water supply, not a great news there either. As of April 4th, the regional water system storage was about 74%. Normal system during this period of time is about 82. SFPUC declared a local water shortage emergency on November the 23rd, calling for volunteer system-wide 10% reductions for January through April. Palo Alto's water use exceeds its budgets by about 18%. And the staff is planning more outreach, encouraging residents and business to save their water while caring for the urban canopy. May bring some, we're hoping some more showers, but again, overall, our storage is going to be depleted. Treeline USA, CPAU earned the recognition as a 2022 Treeline USA member. Treeline USA is a national program recognized to the public and private utilities for best practices and for protecting and preserving American urban forestry. So we're grateful for that award. It's a nationwide recognition, so we're very happy about that. One of the items that the commission asked about was a little bit of an update on where we are with EV charger counts. We currently have over 130 sites enrolled in the CPAU EV programs, including 86 multifamily properties, representing over 3,400 units. We did not add any new ports in this quarter, though, unfortunately. A little bit of a fiber also update was asked by the commission. As of today, we have 246 community members pinning their addresses to the city's fiber map. So 246 as of today. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was most likely all of you received a notice by an email or possibly by mail about a letter that came out that talked about that there was late payments that occurred. So as of April 20th was the date that the notices went out to the community. It went out to about 11,000 customers during that time, stating that their account was delinquent and then they needed to make contact to the utilities to make some type of arrangement. It was a huge error on our part. We were going to represent to about 1,500 customers. The letter should have been going out for 90 days plus. So they went out to businesses as well as residentials. That was the intent. That did not happen. We inadvertently emailed those customers that probably had a balance that was over more than 2 weeks. So that would have been in that 30-day window when people would actually be paying their bill. We did put some, one of the things that we talked about as we were working on this is that we need to have more eyes on the items that we send out to the customers. We put together the email addresses. This was not something that we could say from a technical standpoint that there was an error. We actually created those email accounts, and we've been working on this for some time, and we made the mistake on sending this out to 11,000 customers when it should have only gone out to the 1,500 customers. So we've talked about that we need to have more eyes on what goes out to the public and out to the community. We did receive quite a few calls the next day into customer services. We did send out another email to all the customers. We mailed out about 300 letters. That was about the number that we sent out the first letter that was put out. So again, that happened on April 20th. And like I said, I'm sure that probably most of you on the commission and others received that notification. So and with that, that pretty much concludes my report. Questions?
Thanks, Director Batchelor. I have a question. Are there any other commissioners want to go first? So a couple of things. Just on the topic of, so what is the utility doing to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And that's what you said, getting more eyes on it. Is there a formal chain of eyes that see everything that now is going to become a longer formal chain?
So typically the chain is that, it's usually internal chain that there was a team that was actually looking at this through customer service. We also had our billing experts looking at this when we put it together. And now I've asked some of the other department heads had need to sign off on it from the customer service, as well as Dave Yen and his group. And then I will also have eyes on it as we send out some type of notices to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
And my other question was, you mentioned that it was intended for 1,500 customers who were 90 plus days late. How does that compare to sort of average numbers pre-pandemic?
Pre-pandemic, that is still really high, that 1,500 customers. Typically, we would only see maybe 20 to 30 people that would fall into that 90-day window. So whatever that percentage is, it's quite much larger than what it had been in the past. And so we have set up a procedure that we're asking folks that are 90 days and over to contact us and put them on a payment plan. And the payment plan is that it will be paid back over a 3-year period of time.
And do you have a breakdown of residential versus commercial customers?
I think Dave Yen might have that number. Or do you want to get?
That's great if you have it handy. Otherwise, I can follow up.
Thank you.
Davian, Utility Strategic Business Manager. So as of right now, over 180 days, we have 1,200 customers. 1,041 are residential and another 175 are commercial. The total outstanding balance for greater than 180 days is 1.3 million. And that's across all utilities, including storm drain and refuse. So greater than 90 days, between 90 to 180 days, we have another 238 customers that have outstanding bills, equaling to 582,000.
That's good info. Thanks.
I do want to mention we did receive $1 million of federal and state funding to help with some of these arrearages, but that's already been deducted from this balance. So that was for gas, electric, and water. And we're expecting maybe another 190,000 for wastewater. So we're filing that right now with the state.
Got it. Thank you. And I guess it's a discussion for another time, how to make use of that federal aid toward this problem.
The federal aid's already been applied to these accounts that had arrearages, so they've already got credits. So
Oh,
their
I see.
balances,
Oh, okay.
yeah, got reduced already. Previously, our balance was like 2.5 million. Now we're about 1.5 million.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Oops. All right. All right. So we are moving on to new business. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. I guess one follow-up on making sure that this doesn't happen again is that even adding layers of eyes, I can envision where those eyes are really looking at the communication and not the recipients of the communication. So just to throw a plug in to make sure that's part of it. And then on the fiber map, you said there were 246 addresses, and my recollection is that's about what it was before. So do you have a sense of how much it's changed since the last update?
What's that? Yeah, I was gonna say that's only, so it's been about 10 to 15 from the last time.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Sorry, I missed your lit up light. All right. Any further comments on the utility director's report? Then now we will move on to new business. The first item of which is to elect a new UAC chair and vice chair to serve a slightly abbreviated term from today through the end of March of next year. And so why don't we start and seeing if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if calling in. No hands raised. Thanks.
All right. I guess by way of doing discussion before we take motions, I would like to thank you all for letting me serve as chair for the last almost 2 years. It's been an honor and a pleasure. But I think it's time to have fresh leadership. So having said that, are there any volunteers or nominations?
I'll nominate Lauren. Our vice chair.
I'm happy to second that motion. Is there any discussion? Vice Chair Siegel, do you, if nominated or if elected, will you serve as chair?
It would be my honor.
Is there any additional discussion or should I go to roll call? All right, let's vote. Commissioner Scharf,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
First of all, thank you. And yes, it will be an honor.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Yes.
and I vote as well in favor. So congratulations, Chair Siegel. And I believe procedure now calls for you to take over chairing the meeting and to conduct the remainder of the election. Do you want the iPad? I'll send it your way.
Okay, well, thank you for that vote of confidence. And now we will move to electing a vice chair. Is that right? Okay,
It's gonna die, so I'm gonna plug it in.
okay.
So I haven't asked him, but I'll nominate AC Johnson.
Do we have a second for that?
I was thinking the same thing, Commissioner Scharf, so I am delighted to second that nomination if Commissioner Johnston is willing to serve.
Commissioner Johnson?
Well, it's an honor to be nominated. I frankly had not contemplated, but sure, I would be happy to serve.
Great. Do we have any discussion or does someone want to move to vote or should we go straight to roll call?
I'd move that we go straight to roll call. Could you speak up a little bit?
Sure. Thanks. Okay, so I'll go Commissioner Scharf,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
and I guess it's Commissioner Forcell.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So congratulations, Vice Chair Johnston.
Thank you.
And so we'll move to the next line of business, which is approval of a UAC budget subcommittee. And again, this will be slightly shorter term from now until March 31st. Do we have any comments from the public?
Please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9. No hands raised.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody who would like to nominate someone or volunteer to serve on the budget subcommittee?
I'll volunteer.
Great, Commissioner Scharf.
I too would like to volunteer.
Great, Commissioner Smith. And we can have up to 3 members.
I can also volunteer.
Okay, great. So we have Commissioner Bowie, Commissioner Smith, and Commissioner Scharf. We have a motion to accept the 3 volunteers as the members of the UAC Budget Subcommittee.
Also move.
I think in the past, we haven't actually voted on this. When we got 3 volunteers, we just called it a day.
Okay, well then,
Tabitha's nodding her head, so I think we're okay then.
okay. Just approve, just go through roll call. Okay, Commissioner Scharf,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith. Or do you just approve? I guess it is. Okay, well, great. We have a budget subcommittee.
Yes.
Commissioners Bowie, Smith, and Sharp. Thank you for volunteering. We can move on to the next item, which is approval of the UAC Fiber Subcommittee. And again, the term is slightly reduced from now until March 31, 2023. Do we have any volunteers for the Fiber Subcommittee?
I would volunteer for that committee.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Johnston.
I would also like to volunteer, but I would also like to give fellow commissioners an opportunity to volunteer.
I would like to ask Commissioner Metz if he's interested in serving on the Fiber Subcommittee.
I'd be willing to do it. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Metz. And I believe we can have up to 3 on this one as well. So if there's any other volunteers or Commissioner Smith. Great, well, thank you. So this will be Vice Chair Johnston, Commissioner Smith, and Commissioner Metz. All right, we'll move on to item 4, which is adoption of a resolution authorizing use of teleconferencing for the UAC meetings. And we've been through this quite a few times. Are there any public comments?
Hands raised.
Great, thanks. So we can have a conversation, or if somebody wants to move to accept the resolution.
I'll move to accept the resolution.
I'll second.
Great. So we'll go through roll call. Vice Chair Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Scharf,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Commissioner Forcell,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. Great, moving right along. We will now turn to the operating and capital budgets. And there will be a presentation. Before that, are there any comments from the public?
No hands raised.
Great, we'll go forward with the presentation.
Chair Siegel, we do have a presentation tonight. We are going to present tonight our proposed operating and capital budgets. As you know, that the rates were already approved through that, so we'll have very little conversation about that, but most of this is going to be on the operating and the capital side. Tonight, I have with me Dave Yen, our strategic manager, Alex Harris, and Anna Wong, who will be walking us through the presentation. And does the commission want to have open it up for questions after each fund, or do you want to go in between? What would you like? Or it's totally up to the commission.
Let's sort of start and see whether there are questions.
Okay. Anna, you're going to start.
Okay, yes. Good evening, Commissioners. Councilmember Cormack. I'm Anna Vong. I'm happy to be here, part of the team presenting the proposed budget tonight. This is a baseline budget to maintain current service delivery levels. Most of our proposals are staffing and there's one on building electrification. So what do we mean by baseline budget? Is basically that they're budgets that are carried forward with minor adjustments to maintain our service levels. Next slide. This slide is an overview of the budget process and where we are today. So we work with the divisions who are submitting their requests, and we package them up for review with HR, OMB, and the city manager's office. And we are here tonight to seek your recommendation of the proposed budget, and then it will move on to Finance Committee next week, and then Council in June for final approval. Next slide. There are no new capital projects being proposed this year, but we wanted to highlight a few projects that are underway or planned for fiscal year 23. On the technology side, we're looking to replace and upgrade our current outage management system to include more communication features such as push notifications and outage status alerts for the crews and customers. This new system will integrate with our customer billing system, GIS, and the new AMI. The fiber management system will integrate 3 systems into one. It's customer service, engineering, and operations to manage, track, and view data for the fiber network system. And the system will be critical for our fiber expansion plan. In the category of master plans, we will be conducting a study of our electric distribution network to prepare for electrification, two-way power flow for local generation, and improved system reliability. The study is currently underway and should be completed by the end of summer. And the next one, this topic was brought to the commission last month. We're updating the wastewater collection master plan, which was last conducted in 2004. The study will have 2 components, a capacity assessment and infrastructure condition. It'll help us prioritize the main replacement schedule. And this next slide, this is a recap of the rates being proposed for fiscal year 23. Please note that the rates in the outer years are preliminary projections and may change. So this shows an estimate of an increase of $15.48 on the monthly bill, or an increase of 4.7%. And if there are no questions, we'll go on to the next slide. Oh, this.
I had a question on the rates. As I understood the chart, the percent changes are for the total bill, assuming that the commodity rate is constant. So I want to understand ballpark, what percent of each bill is commodity versus non-commodity?
Oh, I don't have that breakdown.
Just like for electricity, for example, just to get a
Sure.
flavor of
For
what the real
electric,
rate
I
increase
think all of it's 100% commodities already included with the 5%. Only for gas and water, those are pass-through costs.
Right.
So, but the other utilities already include the commodity rates in there.
Right. So for electricity,
Uh-huh.
what percent of the bill
Oh.
is for the
How
commodity
much is supply
portion?
versus rate or supply?
I don't have that. Yeah.
We would have to crunch through that number and provide it separately.
Okay, so you'll check it out. Okay.
Yeah, we can look back at the financial plans that Eric and Lisa have presented and get you those breakdowns.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
We can look back at the financial forecast plans that Eric and Lisa presented. They should have the breakdown between supply and distribution. That was in the rate.
Oh, I see. So in the detail
Yeah, on those-
operating budget.
In the 5-year financial plans that they have,
Okay.
that we brought forth, I think it was March to the UAC. And then,
Okay.
but we can get you those figures. They're
Okay.
readily available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Vice Chair Johnson, did you have a question?
I did have a question. Back actually on slide 3, sorry to be behind it. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the scope of the study that's being done on the electric distribution system. Is this kind of the roadmap that we talked about a couple of months ago for getting the distribution system ready for the SCAP?
Tom Marshall. Tom, are you able to speak to that? Tom Marshall is our Assistant Director of
Yes,
Operations.
I can speak to that. Hello. Yeah, so we're doing the initial study for electrification. We just started recently and we've given it to a consultant to do, and they're doing the first take at looking at the system and evaluating it for what kinds of upgrades we're going to need to do. And also to take it to look at the loads out on the system to try to determine how much the load increase will be and what we have to plan for. And like they mentioned, we're expecting something by the end of probably late summer, early fall, we'll have that study back.
I'm very pleased to hear that. That's great. And I look forward to seeing that study.
Commissioner Bowie.
Yes, just a question as well on the monthly bill change. Does FY22 include the hydro rate adjustments already at the 0%?
No, this does not include the hydro rate adjuster.
Okay. And so is that something that's projected to change as well in FY23, 24, and so on?
For now, it's for FY23. I think it depends on the hydro conditions or whether or not it will carry forward to FY24. But for now, it's just FY23. And
Okay.
currently now, I think it was effective in April.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll sneak one more question in. The user tax, is that just paid to the city's general fund?
Yes, the utility users tax is a 5% surcharge on water, gas, and electric, and it goes towards the general fund for their services.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, so remind me why the water is going up so much, because I think Commissioner Bowie made a good point. There's also the hydropower adjustments, right? So it'll be more than that.
For the water, there are two components. There's a 5% increase for the distribution side. And then SFPUC is meeting on May 10th to raise the retail rates. I think they're proposing 15.9%. So that's why it's going up from 5. I think we're proposing 8.9% in total for both SFPUC and our distribution increase.
And our distribution increase is driven by, just remind me.
It's driven by salaries, benefits, CIP improvements, and just escalating costs. And it's also to replenish some of our reserves. We haven't been raising water rates in the last couple of years. So just to bring this back above, well, that's actually keep us in line in the reserve guidelines.
Okay, no, that's fair. I was just curious because I was thinking it was going to go up quite a bit.
Yeah, SFPUC did consider going up as high as 25%, which would have increased our rates from 9% to like 13%. But fortunately, I think they've settled at 15.9 instead of 20. For this
And is
year.
that is the SFPUC rate still driven by all their improvements they basically did when they rebuilt the water system, so to speak?
Parts of it's improvement, but mainly it's because of the drought. They've asked for a 10 or 15% cutback from all their agencies. So they still have to cover all those fixed costs.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Commissioner Metz. So you had a question about the commodity rates on the rates increase, how much it was a commodity versus a supply. So for electric, commodity is 56%, gas it's 31%, and water it's 45%, and wastewater is 53% from the treatment.
Could you repeat that? So for electric, the commodity portion was
Is 56%,
about 56%, and for gas, it's
31%.
31%. Okay. So for electric, the say 5% increase is really a kind of a 10% increase of the non-commodity portion, right?
Mm.
Isn't that right? If the non-commodity portion is less than 50%. Right.
From my interpretation, the 5% increase, 2.5% of that is commodity related, and then the other 2.5 is distribution related. Assuming it's
Commissioner Metz, it's not a pass-through for the electric utility.
Okay.
Just the gas and the water is the pass-through.
I see. Okay.
I don't know, Assistant Director Jonathan Abenshine's on the phone, if you'd like to speak to this question.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think Commissioner Metz, what you're getting at is that if there's a 5% overall increase, for example, and well, I think what you're getting at is that a certain percentage overall increase reflects a higher percentage increase in just the non-commodity part of the rates if commodity is the same as it was the previous year. And you're right about that. The ratios really depend on the utility.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. Thank you.
Sorry about that. And here on this slide, it shows the residential monthly bill impact. And this is from a customer's perspective. The average residential monthly bill will increase from $332 a month to $348. And now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Alex Harris, to present the electric and gas funds.
All right. Good evening, commissioners and Councilmember Cormack. For the next few slides, we'll be going over the preliminary operating and capital budgets by fund. If you're following along with the links that were provided, the first link contains a preliminary view of the capital budget organized by fund. It includes a detailed budget summary table by project. The second link in the agenda, the staff report, contains a preliminary view of the utilities operating budget, and that is organized by fund, starting with an overview, various budget summary tables, and it ends with a detailed reconciliation table of the prior year's budget to the fiscal year 2023 budget. So next slide, please. All right. So this slide shows the top 3 expense categories for the electric fund. It's the utility purchases, the capital improvement program, and salary and benefits. For fiscal year 2023, there's approximately $211.7 million budgeted and 120.82 FTE. If looking in the preliminary operating book, there is a detailed year-over-year change table on page 11. And there you'll see some interesting notes. For example, salary and benefits are increasing by 2.8 million or 10.7%. This is primarily due to proposed staffing changes, but also a utilities-wide 4% base increase. So you'll see this throughout all the funds, and an additional contribution to the pension trust fund. This is a citywide change that council had approved. The supplemental pension trust fund contribution is explained in more detail for the electric fund on page 20, proposal number 7. Other changes are in the contract services, which have increased by 4.8 million or 59.2%. This is due to contract alignments with the tree line clearing contract and hotline high voltage construction contract, along with about 740,000 proposed for the building electrification program support increase. Capital improvement program is currently showing a 5 million decrease, but although most of that is due to funding being pushed out, some of this difference will get smaller after we encumber fully all the fiscal year 2022 funds for any contracts or for any contracts, and when reappropriations are finalized. Next slide, please. So this slide shows year-to-date actuals to budget as of May 2nd. Overall, the electric budget is projected to be spending slightly below budget. Salaries and benefits are projected to end with some salary savings, partially offset by overtime and salary savings that we use to cover contract services that are helping us augment staffing levels. Utility purchase is forecasted to exceed the budget by about 2 million due to more costly on the spot market purchases. That's as a result of low hydro output. This is including the mid-year increase that we did, which means that when we approve the mid-year, our assumption from then we're projected to increase slightly more. The capital improvement project is projected to end below budget due to shortage of staff, so slowing down in designs and RFP bid packages. However, funding for projects continuing into fiscal year 23 will likely be reappropriated to the following year. And other expenses are projected to end below budget due to approximately 3.4 million delay in rebates or incentives from the UPS programs due to COVID and new contracts for efficiency programs. And then throughout the funds, you'll see that allocated charges looks low at 57%. However, they are projected to be on target. It looks low due to accounting's timing of when they perform their quarterly close. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a high level of the electric fund's 5-year capital improvement program.
Excuse me, could I just ask one question back on the previous slide before we move off that?
Yes.
So this has a column that says year-to-date actuals plus encumbrances. First of all, what year-to-date, what's the date of the year-to-date? Is that through the end of March?
Through May 2nd.
Oh, through May 2nd, okay.
Yes.
And then the term encumbrances, I'm just not familiar with that. What is that?
Oh, yes, those, so encumbered funds are funds that have been dedicated or committed already to contracts.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's helpful.
No problem. And so back on slide 9, this overview, it corresponds to details that you could find in the preliminary capital budget on page 5, which will show the budget details by project. So the fiscal year 22 column here, this looks a little high. It shows that we have 35 million estimated to spend by the end of fiscal year 22. However, out of that, 8.5 million was a carry forward from the previous year, meaning it was funding appropriated in prior years that was carried into fiscal year 22. Staff actually projects fiscal year 22 to end with 12 million in actuals. We'll probably encumber or commit about 13 million and reappropriate or return to fund balance the remaining 3 to 6 million. Reappropriations are in this fund, we anticipate it's due to limited engineering staff, reprioritization of the underground conversions, and then grid assessment. We do need to have some spending anticipated for fiscal year 23. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a new slide. This slide shows non-recurring one-time projects in the last 7 years, and it is staff's attempt to address UAC questions on how projects have been performing in prior years. So to quickly orient us on this slide, I'll go over what each column represents. So starting from the left, the start year indicates the start of major design or construction activity. Prior year actuals provide the project lifetime total actuals prior to fiscal year 17. And then in the 17 to 21 columns, they show the actual project expenditures in those fiscal years. The 22 year-to-date column shows the current year-to-date actuals as of May 2nd for fiscal year 22, including encumbrances, so things that have been set aside or committed, for example, for contracts. The total actuals and encumbered column represents the project lifetime total actual plus encumbrances. And then the 5-year CIP column shows our planned expenditures for fiscal year 23 to 2027. The number of years indicate the number of years since the project was first identified. And staff would like to point out that we did identify some costs that were included that should have been excluded. So we have estimates set aside for labor and supplies and material. We inadvertently treated some of this as encumbrances. They primarily impacted the smart grid project, the underground district 47 project, and the Foothills Rebuild project. And if there are any questions, please let us know.
Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner Purcell.
Can we look at the Foothills Rebuild just as an example? So the first year budget of $2 million, do I understand correctly that it was first budgeted in 2020?
Yes, that is correct.
So how did it get $530,000 prior to FY17?
And I do apologize. So that 530 is actually the labor and materials that were inadvertently included.
Okay, that was the mistake you were just telling us about.
Correct. And we do have a slide that shows some of the corrections at the end in case we want to jump over to view that.
I'm fine to just ignore the $500,000
Okay.
in red. Because it's what I'm trying to understand then is, I mean, is this just a horrible example? Because I'm going to then ask about the 11 million remaining.
That's fine. Yeah, so this project started in 2020. So we are undergrounding or creating substructure work up in the foothills. I think there's a total about 15 miles of lines we have to convert from overhead to underground. Thus far, we've completed 1.5 miles. So that's part of the spending in FY21 and also some of it in FY22. We're also planning the next 1.5 miles right now. So that is part of FY22 encumbrance and also in the future 5-year CIP. So the 5-year CIP, the 11 million, is to try to encumber the remaining, I guess, 13.5 miles.
So the difference between the original 2 million budget and the additional 11 million, is it just the original? I guess what I'm getting at is.
Sure. So this is the
Was
first
it
year
vastly
budget.
underestimated what it would cost to do this project, or it was always intended, we'll start with 2 million and then we'll do more later?
That is correct. I think the plan would be about $15 million project, but we could only do $2 million worth in 1 year. We didn't want to encumber all 15 million in the beginning, in the first year of the contract or project.
May I also add that part of the difficulty, we do plan our capital budget with the 5-year plan, but we only adopt the current fiscal year. And so having the first year budget can also.
That's what's confusing me. The first year budget is not the full budget.
Correct.
It's just what was approved for the first. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, some of these projects are multi-year planning, so you don't unfortunately see those subsequent years in that first year budget. And because of our accounting or budgeting system, it's not the easiest to reconcile back. We would have to manually look up each project year by year to come up with the actual budgeted amount, additional budgeted amount ongoing. Yes, Commissioner Metz.
Yeah, I just would like a clarification on the 5-year CIP forecast. That does not include anything related to SCAP, correct?
As of right now, we don't have any SCAP projects on the 5-year forecast, but we are talking about it next year, like the electric grid modernization. We are doing that assessment right now, and so that project will be included in our electric.
But the expenditures here don't include that. Right?
None of those.
Okay, that's what
None of these are addressing SCAP as of right now.
Any other commissioner questions? I have one also on this page with the smart grid technology. And so with the FY22 actuals and encumbered, we have 7.5 million. So that means that's been allocated for that. Do we know how much has already been spent?
I think as of right now, it's been only less than a couple 100,000.
And is part of the holdup the GIS system
No,
or?
right now, the holdup is actually the delivery of the meters. Right now, we're still in the planning phase, working with the different vendors and the different systems. So we have the Census head-end system, we have the Compass, our SmartWorks MDM system. So right now, we're still in the planning phase. And then hopefully by the end of May or June, the first article meters will be coming in. And once we approve of those, then we'll start getting shipments of those meters. So the cost will come probably at the end of this calendar year. More of it will come.
Okay, so FY23.
Yeah, I think we're expecting to install about 3,000 meters by end of this fiscal year. So it'll be just a portion actually. The budget's about 20 million. So we might spend maybe $1 million or $2 million this year, but the majority of it will be spent next year in 2024 when we do full deployment.
And so just on a timing perspective, how close are we to the original time budget? You know, when we thought we'd start rolling out.
We're still hopeful. So it depends on if the meters slip any further. We are working with the providers, the vendors, to see how soon they can get us the meters. I think that's the biggest holdup as of right now, a question mark. But as of right now, we're still planning, hoping for full deployment by end of 24.
That's great. And I have two other sort of little questions, but they're part of the electric fund. And one is that I thought I saw something about there's the rebuild of underground District 15 is somewhat being delayed because of discussions with the neighborhood about possibly, I don't know what, is it to underground the transformers and they pay for it? And I'm wondering how the system we put in place for that option has been working out.
So Chair Siegel, sorry. So we have only been having conversations with that group. If you remember, this is the Green Acres area that was going back and forth. So we went back out, we gave them the options. The option was for them to pay a portion of that for if they wanted to keep it underground, or we were going to go with transformers. At that point, they still were not pushing back on that. They actually got a lawyer involved. So we turned it over to our legal department. So we were still having conversations and we have not broke ground on that project at all. It's still an ongoing battle with that neighborhood out there.
Great, thanks. Any other questions or we can move on? Oh, yes, Councilmember Cormack.
I have to say it is remarkably more complicated with iPads and masks, but it's good to be in person. I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Metz's comments back on slide 9, if we may. I'm certain this will come up at Finance next week, and no doubt once this is back at council, but let's just be super clear that the blue bars do not include the necessary grid modernization that is going to come as a result of the plan that is captured right in the blue bars that's captured in FY23 or this year.
That is correct. The blue bar, really, the big spike is really the AMI project.
Just encourage you when you present this to say that out front. We'll not wait for the question because I certainly anticipate the blue bars starting next year are going to be much larger, especially in the out years. Okay, and then on slide 10, I have the actual paper, so I guess it's 10A now. Wow, that's a lot of work. I've never seen this before, and I think it's a testament to the complexity of the projects that you all have to manage over time. And I think this will actually be useful going forward as UAC and particularly the Finance Committee think about, because I know we have this conversation every year, how much can the staff really handle in 1 year? And we'll get to the vacancies later on in the program, but I I'm grateful for the time that you spend going into this and reconciling all of this. I think it's going to be really helpful when you talk about just the complexity going forward. And so, yeah, really, really happy to see this. I'm sure it took a lot of work. Thank you.
The credit actually goes to the UAC for asking for it.
Okay, and then you guys had to do it, so.
Yes, combination.
Okay, so gas fund. So this slide shows that the top 3 expense categories for gas are utility purchases, capital improvement program, and salary and benefits. For fiscal year 2023, there's approximately 58.6 million budgeted in the gas fund and 54.56 FTE. The year-over-year details in the budget table can be found starting on page 34. In there, salary and benefits has increased 9.9 million or 8.4%. And again, 4% is due to the base increase. There are some staffing changes, but then there's also that additional contribution to the pension trust fund. The general expense and the contract service categories, they have increased significantly, and that's primarily due to the 2.1 million we're proposing for the building electrification program support increase. This is detailed out on proposal number 8, page 43. And this increase is to expand third-party programs, customer rebates, and related contract services to support building electrification. Lastly, the capital improvement program shows a 5.7 million increase, and this is primarily due to fiscal year 23 being a construction year for the gas fund. Next slide, please. And here, the gas fund shows that we're trending pretty much on track. Salary and benefits may end a little below budget with anticipated vacancy savings by the end of the year. Utility purchase is actually on track. That's including the mid-year increase of 7 million. The percent here just appears higher because purchase contracts are encumbered 100%, but we will probably not spend all of it. The contract services are trending slightly below budget for gas efficiency contracts as staff launches new reports and programs. The rent and debt service appears low, but this is due to how debt is posted. So it looks like we budgeted 800 for debt service, but only paid 50,000 so far. That's just due to how accounting posts them. The allocated charges is on track, but similar to electric fund, it looks low, that low percentage is there due to timing of accounting's quarterly close. Next slide, please. And here's a high level of gas funds 5-year CIP. This can be found, the details by project are summarized in the preliminary capital budget book, page 87. Excuse me, not book, but the link. Regarding the current year, fiscal year 22 is estimated at 11 million, but out of this 11 million, 6.7 was carried for 6.7 million was carried forward from fiscal year 21 to 22, and this is for GMR 23. Staff anticipates, though, that fiscal year 22 will end with about 7 million year-to-date actuals, 2 million encumbrances or commitments, and approximately another 2 million to be reappropriated. Next slide, please. So most of the non-recurring one-time projects in the last 7 years for the gas fund are gas main replacement projects. These projects are sometimes bundled together to increase the size of the project to attract more bidders and get better unit pricing. For example, GMR 19, 20, and 21 were actually bundled together, and so they have the same start year and kind of the same spending in the column. Delays in GMR 22 and subsequently GMR 23 were due to the upgrade downtown project. In order to minimize disruptions on University Avenue for businesses and patrons, we delayed the project to align with the construction schedule and coordinate with Public Works and Transportation. And then for GMR 23, the bid was actually not issued until 2020 due to COVID. And so the revised budget is 7 million due to escalating construction costs. And we can pause here and take some questions before moving to the next fund.
Any question, commissioners on Zoom? I have a question if there's no other questions. So just looking at, for example, Project 23, where you said it was delayed until 2020. And so it was originally 2016. And is the 3.5 million for the first year budget what the expected total was going to be, or is that just the original year?
Back then in 2016, that was the original budget we had thought it would cost, but then also we were using some outdated rates for construction. So I think going forward, the regular budget for a GMR project will be closer to 7-8 million. I think we were using outdated rates when we were doing our engineering estimates.
Okay, so that was my question, whether the cost actually doubled in 4 years, or there's some additional explanation for that.
I wouldn't say double probably, but it probably went up at least 50% from what we originally planned.
And is that what you're seeing across the board for CIP?
Yes, they're not going up as high as before, but they're also not going down. So they're kind of right now flattening in a way, and it's still a highway.
So I'm curious about gas main replacement in years after 2016. Where do I look for that?
What is that? After 2016? Sorry, can you repeat your question?
This is on page 87 of your CIP link. I don't know if you have a link to it. So page 87 has the gas summary for the 5 years, including GMRs 23, 24, 25, and 26. I could read it out, I guess, too. In 23, we are completing construction doing construction for project 23. And then in 22, we're finishing 23. And in 23, we'll be working on gas main replacement project 24. And then gas main 25 construction will be in 2025 as well. Sorry, wasn't very clear.
Found it, thank you.
Okay. It's staggered every other year we try. I guess I can go back to this slide that shows it. Sorry, I've done this. So there's one plan for 2023, 2025, and 2027. But depending on when the contract's awarded and when we begin construction, they may slip over 1 year. Commissioner Forsell, do you have more questions, I guess? Okay. Keep going, okay. Okay, next is the fiber fund. So the fiber is one of the smallest of our 5 utilities in utility. The total budget is about 4.6 million. We have about 7 people assigned to this utility. So even though it says 7 FTE, it's really more like 15 people, which is a distribution, a partial part of their time. Some of these other folks also work on street lights and traffic signals and fiber as well. So In regard to the cost drivers, the biggest change in FY23 is CIP. We have $1.5 million encumbered right now still for the Magellan contract. We also set $1 million aside for next year. Part of that is $300,000 for the Foothills undergrounding to address that wildfire mitigation. And we also have another $1 million set aside for the rebuild of the fiber network, just in case something comes out of the study that we need to work on immediately. So we're kind of put in $2 million for the fiber rebuild. Otherwise, everything else is relatively small and there's not much change year over year. So just the CIP, I think, would be the largest component that changes year over year. In regards to budget to actuals for FY22 as of May 2nd, we're basically on target for most of the items here, except for salary and benefits. There is one vacant position in the fiber group that we are proposing to reclass in the FY23 budget. I think we have enough staff right now to fulfill the orders we have. So we'll reassess again in 2024 whether or not we need to add back another headcount. But right now, the engineering department needs a little more support than fiber. So that's why we're proposing to reassign or reclassify one of those fiber technicians to the electric fund next year. And that's why also our budget is 60% of total, just because we've had a vacant position all year long. And then everything else is on target. In regards to the Magellan contract, I think we have to say it was about $2.4 million contract. $2 million was assigned to the fiber fund and $400,000 was assigned to the electric fund. Year to date spent, I think it's about 1.2 or 1.3 million. There is another 1.1 million remaining on the contract. And some of that includes contingency of about 300,000, which we have not used at all. And then some of the remaining task is completion of the engineering design, the community survey, the business case, and also putting the bid packages for the construction. So most of that task hopefully will be done by the end of this calendar year. And then this is the 5-year CIP for looking forward. Again, most of the money in 2022 is due to the Magellan contract. And we're expecting to spend probably 1.5 of it. So the remaining amount will get rolled over to 2023. And then in the FY23, we did set aside some money for the Foothills underground and also the fiber rebuild.
With I guess not the Foothills underground, with the Foothills underground, will the residents who live up off Pageville, will they end up then with fiber to the premises as part of that?
Yes, so for that, while we're doing the undergrounding of the poles, we're also adding extra fiber conduit underneath, just so if we ever do build out the network up there, we'll be ready. So we are investing some dollars up there to put in communication conduits. And then we are reaching out to the Foothill Fiber. We are a project with them right now, actually, to at least meet them somewhere so they can connect. So that project's in progress. And then there isn't much to show in this one. It's again just a fiber rebuild. Again, this project's kind of been placed on hold until Magellan completes their engineering design. We don't want to trench multiple times if it's not needed. So we're trying to wait to see how to maximize or optimize the build when the report's done. And assuming we get the green light. So any questions on fiber?
I don't see any questions.
And we'll move to the wastewater utility. This is the wastewater collection fund. The total budget is about 23.5 million. We have about 29 FTEs assigned to this utility. Again, the largest cost driver is the utility purchase or the water treatment charges, which is about 12 million or 51% of the total budget. I think it's about a 6% increase from the previous year, or about 700,000 because of the rehabilitation the plant needs to upgrade and enhance their aging infrastructure. We also here for CIP, There is a 40% decrease year over year, and that's mainly because this is a non-construction year. We're going to be doing design work and finishing up the construction from this year. So you'll see the alternating CIP schedule where 1 year you'll see 6 million, the next year you'll see half of that.
So I have a question. The desalination plant, is that under wastewater or water or common? Are they sharing?
That's actually under the water treatment tent, under the water treatment. So it's not under our utilities, but some of the cost is passed through to us through the treatment charges and the other partners as well.
Just a quick clarification, it's not technically a desalination plant. It's a salt removal facility, which is it's not the full thing that when people talk about desal.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Because I did see a comment that I don't know if it's underwater, but there's concerns that the level of salt is still too high.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to find a use for that water. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if that would be reflected here in water or
Sure, maybe.
neither.
I wonder, is Carla, are you available to speak to that question? Sorry. Okay,
This is collection though, aren't we talking about collection?
right.
Right, so I think that would be in the Public Works version, yes?
Yeah, or
Yeah. It's always been confusing, but yeah.
and this is the wastewater collection budget to actuals for FY22. Similar to the other utilities, our salaries and benefits are slightly below budget due to the vacancies we have. Utility purchases are on target, wastewater treatment costs. For CIP, we are slightly above, and the reason for that is because there was a sewer lateral contract that was lapsing. So we had to bring in an emergency contract to bridge the gap between the old one and the new one that we had to issue an RFP for. So by year end, we'll either have to make a year-end adjustment to adjust for these dollars, or we will disencumber a portion of the new contract. I think it was like $800,000 to do sewer lateral replacements. So costs for those services have definitely gone up as well. So that's what we're seeing. Everything else, all the other budget categories are on track. And then this is the 5-year CIP. Similar to the gas, we are doing alternating year of construction. So FY22, I think we do have about $4 million that we will reappropriate to FY23. The contract is signed and construction starting, but I think it just got signed in April. So the majority of that contract will be rolled over to the FY23 budget. And then we'll have also sewer rehabs in FY24 and FY26. That's why those blue bars are a little higher. And then we are going to come back to the UAC, I think, in the fall to talk about future SSR replacement and whether or not we should be accelerating some of these projects, just because otherwise the infrastructure will be anywhere from 150 to 190 years old at this point at our current pace. So we look forward to that discussion in the fall. And then here's the historical CIP actuals, similar to the gas. We did try to combine some of these projects just because we weren't getting bids when we were bidding out separately. Either we weren't getting the bids or the costs were coming a lot higher than our estimates. So we try to combat that by grouping them, increasing the size of the projects to attract more construction firms, and also hopefully to bring down the price of the per unit. Here. I think that's all I have for this one. Are there any questions for wastewater collection? Okay. And then the last utility that we'll talk about tonight is water. The total FY23 proposed budget for water is roughly 59 million, and we have about 48 FTEs assigned to this. For this one, the largest component drivers, again, is utility purchases or commodity from the SFPUC, the wholesale water. And then also CIP is the second largest portion of it, and then salaries and benefits. Year over year, I think purchase costs are going up about 2% or 400K. And then for CIP though, it is going down 13% or about 1.8 million because this is a non-construction year. But there are some extra CIP projects that are being added one time. One is the security of the tanks of the, I guess, the reservoirs and also the pump stations, adding extra security and cameras. And another one we're doing is also trying to purchase emergency generators near the foothills with Doll Station and some of the pump stations over there to mitigate wildfire as part of the wildfire mitigation plan, I guess. So those are other CIPs we'll be working on. And we're also going to be working on the Doll reservoir replacement. We're going to be finishing the Corte Madero, I think tentatively June of this year. So we'll have 2 left remaining, Doll and Park. In regards to budget to actuals, let's see what kind of highlight here. Utility purchase costs. I think when we reported this back in April, it seemed like there was higher usage because of the low precipitation. So we thought we would have to add more money to the SFPUC contract. But given the recent usage in May, we don't think we'll need it after all. So we should be close to budget instead of being over. So hopefully people continue to conserve and hopefully we won't need that extra dollars. And then other contract services were also below a little bit just because there are some energy efficiency or water conservation programs that have been delayed just due to the shelter in place and just getting some of these contracts up and running and getting IT support and vendor support to implement some of these programs. So the Water Smart is going to be a single sign-on to My CPAL. So you will get like a water home energy report, or water home report, and also give you tips and advices on how to conserve more water. So hopefully that should be coming out this summer. And then for rent and debt service, that one's a little bit weird. Rent and leases are actually grouped together. So the big drop is because there's $1 million been set aside for emergency water generators. The original plan was to lease the generators, but after further evaluation, we decided it's probably better off if we purchase them. So that's being budgeted in the water system improvement CIP. So basically we're just transferring dollars from operating rent and leases to the system improvement CIP. And for the 5-year CIP, nothing to really call out. The main replacement is again in 22, 24, and 26. Those are the large gray bars, the alternating years of the design phases. And then for the blue bars, we are planning the Doll reservoir replacement in FY23, and or at least starting it. And then FY22 includes the completion of the Corte Madero reservoir. And historical.
Can I just ask one question on that chart, just to confirm that the reason for the,
of course,
in FY23, the large blue bar is because of the reservoir replacement. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's $6 million, I think, set aside for the reservoir replacement, another $1 million set aside for the emergency generators.
Okay.
And then I think another 300,000 or 500,000 set aside for the security of the cameras.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then here is the 5 or the look back. Nothing to really call out, unless you guys have questions. Like you can see the last CIP, those are the water tank seismic upgrades. So we're hoping to finish them hopefully by end of, I think we're planning 26, so by end of 27 or 28, we should be done rehabilitating or replacing all 6 or 7? 6 reservoirs. Thanks.
7.
7. Okay. Well, maybe because of El Camino, we added, well, right. So replacing 6, but we have 7. So El Camino is relatively new. So we're not rehabilitating that one. Any questions on water? Sure.
Yeah, Commissioner Forcell.
Thank you. Let's see, I'll use the water utility to ask a question, then I'll see if I can map the answer back onto the other utilities. So if we're looking at the historical project actuals, which I just want to echo the thanks for producing that. I guess my question is the total actuals at the bottom, FY18, 5 million, FY19, 5.4 million, FY20, 4 million, and so forth. How does that compare to the number that was proposed? So, right now we're looking at 2023 proposed and it's around 14 million for the water utility.
Sure.
Is there any place where it's, are these numbers similar to what was
in the budget? No,
in the
that's-
budget?
These are just one-time, non-recurring projects. So what's in the proposed also includes your recurring customer connections, your system improvements. So
Okay.
those are larger dollars that do have actuals every year, but we didn't show that in this slice. Just
Gotcha.
because it's gonna look almost the same every year.
Okay.
These are
All
just
right.
one-time projects.
If one wanted to compare how much of the proposed budget resulted in actuals every year, how would one do that?
Sure, we can add another. I did run some numbers for electric CIP. Let me use that as an example. How about?
Yeah, any utility by way of example is helpful.
Okay, we'll use the cleanup version that Alex and Anna prepared actually. So this is the revised version without those omissions we had earlier where we included planned data. Those beige cells are the corrected figures. So like the Foothills Rebuild that you asked earlier, the 500K shouldn't have been listed as prior year actuals. And then also for smart grid, we didn't spend 7 million prior year or 8 million prior year. So that's some fix ups. But back to your question though, like for FY17 actuals, even though here it says 1.1 million, what we actually spent in total, including recurring projects, is 5.8 million. In 18, we did 6.2 million. In 19, we spent 11.5 million. And in 20 and 21, we spent about 9.4 million. And in 22 thus far, we've spent 7.6 million. So we could put another section into this table, including the recurring projects, so you get the full picture. If that helps.
Yeah, and then I'm just curious, what was the approved budget going into the year versus the actual coming out of the year?
Sure. So the approved budget for electrics generally around 25 million. And so how much we actually spend on a year is probably roughly around 10 million for electric, that is. Of course.
Did you just say every year the approved budget is 25 million and every year about 10 million of that is spent?
Correct.
Can you help me understand why those numbers aren't the same?
Because there's the other 15 millions are usually encumbrances and contracts that aren't completed in that same fiscal year. So then they're rolled over to the next year. And there's also projects that we had planned for that we didn't start or didn't complete. So also those are unspent dollars that gets rolled over as well. So with the $25 million budget, sometimes we only spend, I guess, 10, 40% of it, 40 to 50% of it. And also that's most because of contracts rolling over and also staffing.
Is there, if there's only $10 million of the approved budget that's spent, is there additional money spent from the prior year's approved budget that just didn't get spent until the next year?
Yes. Part of that 10 million could be a rollover.
So on a rolling sense?
Yes.
There's about $25 million of electric CIP that's actually happening every year?
The rolling, the 25 million includes some of the rolling. I would say probably 5 to 7 million gets rolled over every year, or 5 to 10. And then we have an additional new budget for new projects. That's another maybe 15, 20 million. Just hypothetically. But for water, gas, and wastewater, I don't think we have as big of a delta, I guess, between actuals and total budget. So those we usually spend pretty consistently. It's just electric, we have just so many different projects. It just takes longer to get these up and running. Some of these projects now we're trying to do our design builds, something we've never done before. So we're kind of learning as we go. And also based on our vacancy, that is the area we have the biggest challenge, both in engineering and operations.
Well, that's on some level what I'm trying to quantify is sort of, are we falling way behind the pace of CIP that needs to happen?
I guess maybe have Tom speak to Tom.
You know, is there an approved budget that's sort of, we don't have the capacity to spend? And so the actuals, you know, are they sort of chronically falling behind, or are we keeping pace with?
Mm-hmm. So like this year, we did take a concerted effort to review all the projects for electric, and we did disencumber, I think, 6 million, knowing that we're not going to get to it either this year or next year. So we did return some of those dollars to the reserves. So we are trying to reduce the budget, I guess, for CIP, knowing that we don't have the resources right now to complete them all.
Tom, were you? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so yeah, I would say we are constantly behind the 8 ball on the electric projects. A lot of it's due to staffing issues. As Dave has mentioned, we're doing a lot more by contract now, and it's the pace of spending is picking up, but we're still chronically have projects in the budget that we do not get to during the year. We just don't have adequate staffing. And I think, as Dave mentioned, we've cut a lot of projects out of the budget simply because we can't get to them. And as we're moving into this, we're also moving into the additional work that comes with electrification as well. So we are busily trying to figure out how to get more consulting help to try to move all these projects along at a quicker pace. So, and the other part is we're trying to hire staff right now. So.
And I also want to add one project, the customer connection is kind of one of our top priorities. So whenever that usually spends pretty consistent every year, it's about $3 million spend. So that sometimes takes priorities over some of these infrastructure upgrades or improvements. And just because we have so limited staff.
Could you say that again? What's the thing?
Customer connections, news services. So we spend a lot of our staff time also dedicated to that area.
And that takes priority over these other projects. I see.
So I would, sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to jump in that they usually take priority because customers need service. They're usually new homes and things like that, and we have to supply. What we're seeing now more recently, we're seeing a lot more homes coming in with large electrification and solar projects, which is eating up a lot of staff time with those as well. That's impacting our ability to do CIP work.
I mean, I know that what I'm getting at is not news to anyone. It's what I'm still having trouble doing is just sort of quantifying the scope of it. You know, is it a 10% per year thing? Is it a 50% per year thing in terms of, you know, what's been achieved versus what would be achieved had we been fully staffed or, you know, under some other set of circumstances that for meeting the utilities goals for either miles of, you know, pipeline replaced or poles replaced or transformers replaced, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's had a significant impact in the last couple of years, just because we don't have operation, construction, personnel, and we've been short on engineering staff. Even right today, I think we're down probably half our engineering staff right now, and we're busily recruiting, trying to bring people in. So it's going to have some impact. Like I say, we're trying to do our best to bring in contract support to continue to keep things moving forward.
Vice Chair Johnson.
Yeah, just before we move on to staffing, I like others, I'm kind of struggling with this concept that we approve all this money for CIPs, but we don't spend it. all in a particular year. So we're constantly kind of behind the appropriation and the actual spending. I assume that, first of all, we set the rates for a particular year based on kind of the full amount of capital expenditures that is budgeted for that year, correct?
I think the rates are set for both the current year and the outer years as well. Well, mainly for current year, of course.
Okay, but the point is, when we're figuring out what we need to charge to cover our costs for a particular year, we kind of go on the assumption that we'll spend all of the CIP that's allocated for that year.
Assistant Director of Resource Management, Jonathan Abendschein. I can say actually we set the rates based on historical spend levels, and we will adjust them for unusual one-time CIPs. But we do have an allowance in there in the rates for expected level of unspent budget, and it is, larger for electric for some of the reasons that we've talked about there. So we try to take that into account to avoid over collecting, with the expectation that over time, the goal here is to fully spend that budget, and the rates will take that into account.
All right, well, that's helpful, and I guess that's reassuring on one level. And then the money that's collected for CIP but not actually spent, that just stays in the CIP reserve, correct, until it gets spent in subsequent years?
Yeah, that's the goal for once we have those reserves completely set up. The electric CIP reserves, I don't think are fully funded the way we'd like to fund them yet, but yes, that's the plan. And of course, if that level of reserve starts to rise to a certain extent, then we would start drawing it down over time and collecting less from rates if it starts to rise up above the maximum guideline levels that we set.
Okay. All right. Well, this, I can see this is complicated, and I would like to explore it further, but not right now. Thank you.
And another thing I want to add regarding the variance between the budget and the actual spend is for contracts. When we award a contract, we'd award the full amount, even knowing that it might be a 2 or 3 year construction contract. We can't just award a portion each year. We have to allocate budget for the entire contract to go out to bid and award them that work. So sometimes we know for sure, even though we may budget 10, we may only spend 3 million because the other budget will be spent in subsequent years, depending on the complexity of it.
So if $10 million is approved in year one, but it's a 3-year project, and let's just assume you could even spend 3 million that very first year, would there be sort of a new request for the remaining 7 million in the following year's budget proposal?
No, we would.
That $10 million is set aside, it's encumbered.
Right. So we ask
Okay.
for 10 million the first year one, we'll ask for all 10 million.
Right,
And whatever is unspent, we encumber
Right.
and then we roll over
right.
to the next
So I think
year.
those are not the issue. Those are that got budgeted, it got contracted, and it's just going to take 3 years
Mhm.
to finish the project.
Right.
It's more the budgeted and just never got around to it that we're sort of poking at and trying to quantify, like how much of a typical, or on average, how often does that happen? Or not on average how often, but what percentage of budgets are going unspent?
Mhm.
I think the key that, like Dave mentioned, those numbers aren't so much in the water, gas, wastewater side. It's mostly on the electric side, just because of the resource issues that we do have. And I'd say right now we're on the run rate, maybe about 20% of those projects are not getting done. But as we just talked about, is that those funds then just go back into the CIP funds at that period of time. And as Assistant Director Abendschein said, is that, we budget for and we ask for those rate increases as whatever the spend rate of the history has been in each of those funds.
Can I just follow up on that? Does that also add whatever expected inflationary, increases that we expect? And have we gotten better at
For the,
guesstimating those?
yeah, if it's in the contract, usually it's already in that contract when we bid it out, the inflationary aspect of not.
So year two, maybe a 1% increase, or maybe it's a 2%, but it's already written in the contract portion of it. So it does get budgeted that way. So that 10 million might be, inflation rate of maybe 5%, 6% over those 3 years.
But for like the main replacement projects that happens every other year, we do add inflation to that new replacement project.
Councilmember Cormac?
Thank you, Chair Siegel. I'm not sure if it's going to make commissioners feel better or worse to know that this is a problem across the city. Every year we reappropriate. Community services, right? Every year those CIPs, we're going to do these 10 parks and like some number get done. Public Works, same thing, right? Some similar reasons and problems. I appreciate the interest in quantifying this. I guess I would think about it from a different perspective, a little bit like you're talking about the sewer main replacements. Like, are we doing this at a rate that makes sense over time? I would think more about is the work that's being done make sense based on the longevity of the equipment, et cetera, rather than being as focused on what did we budget in what year and what did we spend. I've gotten used to the reappropriation things. We do it every year, and occasionally there's a few little errors and council has to fix those. But it's, I guess the other way to think about the budget, sometimes I joke with members of the executive leadership team about things being aspirational rather than actuals. This is all the work that the staff, the city, the community would like to have done. Yes, it's a constant problem, but what I heard tonight is the staff saying, yeah, there's some that we've taken off the list because when we reprioritize, those don't make it. There are these other new things. Look at what we are asking, this group to do. AMI, that's a whole project. Fiber, that's a whole project, right? Modernize the grid, all the work that's being done on the SCAP. So I'm seeing evidence of that. And I think it's going to be a tough exercise to tie, everything perfectly year to year, what was budgeted, what was spent. We have whole departments that do that. But I think it's a really good question about, are we collectively doing what needs to be done at the rate that means we aren't going to run into failures in whichever. So that's how I'm thinking about listening to this conversation. And I do think there's value in having the budget, requested for that year. It means it's part of the discussion with finance every year. What didn't get done? Why not? And staffing is just one reason sometimes, right? Sometimes we go out to bid and we don't get any responses. So it's I'm glad the UAC is spending time on this, and I appreciate how much time staff is spending as well. And I think helpful to think about what is the rate at which we need to be doing some of these. I assure you that the Finance Committee spends a lot of time on making sure the numbers tick and tie. And there's a whole department that makes sure that whatever we didn't spend gets reappropriated, et cetera. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, that is very much the spirit in which the questions are being asked, is just to make sure that the projects, that our infrastructure is maintained in a healthy state.
I would just like to make a broader comment before we move into staffing. In reviewing the detailed operating capital budget plans, I was really impressed with the detail in those plans, particularly in the capital plan, that really reflected an incredible amount of work, and people really understood and deeply understood each individual project. That really came across in reading those, around page 150 or so. But also came across is how old some of these systems are, and particularly on the electric side. it was really clear that, it's old and aging. And so I think it's something, obviously a responsibility that we have on, how we help address that.
Thank you, Commissioner Metz.
And I just had, before we turn to staffing, two things. One, thank you for the feedback, Councilmember Cormack. I guess I would want to add one thing, which is if the one line item we talked about where it was originally budgeted 2016 and the project went forward at 2020, and there's a 50% increase for that 4-year delay, I'm a little bit sensitive to that as well, because that means higher rates for customers. And so it may be that it's cheaper to hire more contract workers and do it sooner while we're working on the staffing issues with those kind of increases in that short of a time period. And then I just also wanted to circle back to the recycled water. I appreciate that maybe it's outside of UAC to some extent, but okay, well, on page 151 in the utilities capital fund, there's this discussion about the salt removal facility and this comment that the placement of high quality potable water with recycled water remains a concern for the landscape community, among others, and that we need to look for other places to use that water. And I'm just wanting to make sure that we're finding a place for it, or we're reconsidering what we're doing with that.
So I don't have what you're looking at. It's just that we have more volume than we have uses for.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
if-
I mean,
maybe we have it. Maybe we just turn back to it at another time. But my understanding is that we don't have takers because the salinity was higher than was acceptable.
Yeah. So staff is going to help me out here when I get too far out over my skis. But in general, the quality of recycled water we have today is sufficient for many uses, our golf course, Greer Park, et cetera, right? And some corporate commercial customers in Mountain View. It is not sufficient for salt sensitive species such as redwoods. So in order to make more use of recycled water, we need this salt removal facility whose price has recently doubled. The price is doubled. Yeah. So that I'm not looking exactly what you're saying. I'm not seeing that, but that's the problem that we are trying to solve, is that there are customers in Mountain View who would like more recycled water, but need it to have lower TDS, lower dissolved solids, and specifically around salt. So we thought we had a good plan there with Valley Water. And right now we are, pardon the pun, dead in the water. No, we're just stopped. We're pausing while we figure that out. So hope that's helpful. And if there's any staff on here who knows more than I do, they should jump right in.
I think also, Chair Siegel, is that later this year, we will bring the Water One plan, and we will be discussing that here at the UAC. And then we will also have those conversations with the council as well. And so that's going to be addressed in that. And then we're also trying to address this issue with Valley Water as well.
Yeah, this is Carla Daly. I can jump on real quick. Thank you, Councilmember Cormack. I think you covered most of it. The quality of the water is a bigger problem for Mountain View, as Councilmember Cormack said, because they have a lot of development along 101 and customers that are concerned about the water quality. In Palo Alto, it's not really a big deal currently, although if we were to expand the distribution system up to the Stanford Research Park, for instance, then we would need the water to be of higher quality. That was one of the mitigation measures that we cited in the EIR for that project. So improving the water quality doesn't guarantee that the recycled water system gets expanded in Palo Alto, but the recycled water system can't be expanded in Palo Alto without improving the quality. And that's not to say that expanding the system is the best option for our portfolio either. We don't know that yet. As Dean said, we're just kicking off our One Water project, and that recycled water expansion will be one of many projects that we consider in that plan.
Great, thanks. That was, taking you far off. I was much more focused on the way, the increased cost versus what we expected. But thank you very much. I'm sure we'll talk about it more with the One Water plan. We can move this staffing now.
Any more questions before we move to staffing?
This slide here is on our vacancies as of April 22nd. We usually have about 30 to 35 vacancies. We're a little bit higher now at 45. There are currently 25 active recruitments going on, and this includes the new positions that we added at mid-year. As you can see, these vacancies are mostly in electric in both engineering and operations. And due to a competitive employment market, it's harder to retain or attract and retain these folks.
If I could just add, so one of the keys that in the electric engineering group this past week, we lost our electric engineering manager. He decided that he was going to go down south and take another position. So that is one of the numbers that's in here, but it definitely, these positions in operations and electric operations and engineering is, as Anna just mentioned, that's where the majority of our openings are in that. So continue to unfortunately lose some key engineering folks.
I think Assistant Director Abhishek wanted me to mention that he did get promoted to a general manager for another utility down south. So it was a big step for him. So congratulations to him.
Okay, on our next slide is the movement of our in the calendar year. So it tracks our hires and promotions and retirements and separations. We are, through natural attrition, we are losing more employees than we gain. Although in the calendar year of 2022, we were kind of off to a good start with seven new hires. But as you can see with those numbers that we've in vacancies, where we had 10 separations, and this actually does not include taking. So this brings us to our next slide about staffing, recruitment, and retention strategies. So we did recently reorganize the engineering and operations from, electric, fiber, water, gas, wastewater, engineering and operations to electric, fiber engineering and operations, and water, gas, wastewater engineering operations. And this has helped actually in one of our recent recruitments for the assistant director of the water, gas, wastewater position. We've received more candidates as well as more qualified candidates, and we're currently in the final rounds of that recruitment. So some of the things that we're doing in terms of retention is we have some apprentice programs such as the system operators. And what we're also doing with engineers is that we're hiring more entry-level engineers and training them up to journey level. We're also developing a program for compliance technicians. We're cross-training our meter readers with the, as for the upcoming AMI project, those meter readers will be moving on to other positions or jobs. And we're also attending career fairs in person again. So there was a recent trip to San Luis Obispo and Sac State. Actually, Christine went. And the college students there were really excited to hear about the upcoming projects that we have in Palo Alto. So we're hoping to get some momentum from there. What we need to explore is salaries for the critical positions, maybe higher than market compensation, possibly retention bonus, and employee subsidized housing. So just some ideas out there. Mhm. Okay, sorry. And so the next slide, as we mentioned in the opening slides, the majority of the budget changes are primarily in staffing proposals. In the prior years, we did not bring any new position requests. So through these reclassifications of existing positions, the add drop and new ads, we have a net result of 5.5 new positions. And they are grouped here by activity. So for SCAP, it's a net 2.5 FTE. We'll be adding 1 new principal utility program manager, a sustainability program admin, an associate sustainability program admin, and to increase the project management support. And then we'll also be increasing the 2 senior planners, 2 senior resource planners from part-time to full-time to add capacity for portfolio management. And in the fiber, we're adding 1 FTE. It's the fiber engineer to work on the dark fiber network through CIPs and the customer service projects. And the next category after that is the keep up. We're adding 2 FTEs here. It's a management analyst to provide coordination and support to address staffing shortages that are impacting HR, procurement, and legal. And they'll provides ongoing centralized support to improve processes and facilitate the interdepartment coordination that's required with those other departments, and as well as an equipment operator for the wastewater collection group. And then the next slide here is for the AMR project. We currently have, and this affects our meter reading group, we currently have 7 meter readers. And over the next 3 years, we'll see that number go down to about 1 meter reader. And these positions will be backfilled by hourly positions. The 1 remaining meter reader will assist with any meters that need troubleshooting post AMI deployment. And we'll have to manually read meters for those customers who opt out. Any questions about this slide? No. And then lastly, there are some reclassifications of our existing positions to meet the department's current business needs. I won't read through these positions. And that actually brings us to our recommendation slide and the end of the presentation. But you have, of course, questions.
Commissioner Metz.
Yeah, I had a question about staffing. Obviously retainment, as you talked about, is a big problem. Have we done, do we have a root cause analysis, to understand why we're losing so many people? I mean, it looks like this is accelerated this year, and it was pretty high before. Is it, what do we think the root causes are of not being able to retain people?
So I think it's kind of twofold. I think one is just salary alone. We still compete heavily with Santa Clara. We just recently, or is going to leave this week or next week. We're going to lose one of our operators, our system operators, which is a key position for us. It's going to Santa Clara. We lost one of our engineers to go to Santa Clara just recently as well. As Dave mentioned, we lost our electric manager for an opportunity for him to move down south. And I think also the other key portion of it is cost of living. Cost of living is really hurting us at this period of time. And so we are seeing the younger folks are leaving us that might be in the 2 to 3 year period of time. They're starting to having a family. They're starting to wanting to buy a home. And some of them don't want to commute that hour to an hour and a half. And so they are moving out away from us. And, they're just starting to scratch the surface of getting fully trained. So I think that those are the functions that are having some effect to some of our people that are leaving. We do have some retirements. There was a few retirements in this portion of it. I think that the twofold is unfortunately is the two that I mentioned first.
It sounds like though some people are moving locally, right? So.
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Like, it sounds like some people are moving.
Yes.
Within the region, like to Santa Clara. So, I mean, is there something they're doing better than what we're doing? I mean, are they paying a lot more money or some other incentives that we're not providing?
So their salary ranges are a little higher than ours, anywhere from about 25% more than what some of these key positions that we have are going. Some of them are that, like I said, Santa Clara has always been a big competitor of ours. One is some work hours for the operator. He feels that right now we work 410s and they work 12-hour shifts on 3 days a week. He feels that shift and the increase in salary was benefiting for him and his family to move to that. So I think that there are some things that we can do without having any kind of financial impact. So it is going to take us a little bit of time. We do have a couple more trainees that are in the operating group. Once we can get that kind of settled down, then we can start looking at having a little bit more flexible of hours. Because our goal would be is that we would like to get back to 24/7, 7 days a week. And right now, we're only working until about 9 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. We're closed on Saturdays and Sundays. And we do have operators on call, just as we do with the crews that can come in for emergency purposes and that. But there's a cost of doing that as well. There is a premium cost for being on call for these individuals, but we would like to be there. Right now, after that period of time, the phones get transferred down to PD comm. So when someone calls in for an emergency, it actually goes through PD comm. Then they have to contact the operator or the crew to take some time. So response time is up when we have to go for an outage or something like that. So I think that, once we can get a little bit settled, we can start looking be a little bit more flexible in some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Excellent.
Yeah. Commissioner Forso.
I have one question for staff. I'm just curious, sort of what's the climate out there when we put CIP projects, when we issue an RFP? I think somebody mentioned sometimes nobody responds, but what's typical? Is it, yeah, how many responses, how many proposals do you typically get? Are they usually for the expected amount? Sort of what's it like out there trying to push CIP projects through?
I just want to say it's a very competitive market right now. So usually we'll get maybe 2 or 3 bids, and that's considered decent. At times we might get 1 or no bids, so then we would have to repackage or rescope the RFP and we'll have to cancel the bid, then contact some of the other construction firms and find out why they didn't bid on these projects. And usually it's because they're too busy with other projects, or the size of the project isn't big enough for them. So it wasn't high priority for them.
How many companies are active in this region that you sort of expect can handle our projects?
For construction, for water, gas, I want to say 3 to
About three to four, probably.
3 to 4.
3 to 4.
So if you hear from everybody, you get 4 proposals.
I mean, we get a lot of folks that want to look at the project because the way that our software is, you can actually see how many people will actually open it up and take a look at it and see what it is. We get lots of interest. There's a lot of folks. I mean, you may get 50, 60 folks that will look at it, construction firms. But when it comes down to what the work is, some of them are not really all that qualified to do the work for boring of the streets. We don't ask for open trench. We want everything in a bore style construction. We are fortunate right now, as Alex talked about, the hotline contract, which is our electric. They've been able to work with us. We were having one crew for quite some time. Then we asked for a second crew and they were able to bring that on. But that cost of that contract is about 3 times as much as if we had a 4-man crew that was a Palo Alto employee.
3 or 4.
3 or 4?
Sometimes on the electric, we only get 1 or possibly 2. Usually we don't see a lot. And a lot of that's because most of the contractors are working on large PG&E projects. So when we're using a hotline, we're usually getting one of their crews. When we need extra help, they borrow from some of their PG&E crews and bring them in. But it's a very, very competitive market right now for electric construction staff. And it's very difficult to get contractors. And the prices are extremely high. I think we're paying about $13,000 a day for construction crews right now.
And then another thing we heard from the Magellan was that they did reach out to some of the construction crews, and they said that Palo Alto is could be seen as a more difficult just because we have limited hours or restricted hours. So I guess they lose money by mobilizing shorter hours. So I think we have certain hours that they can work within, and then they will have to mobilize and then come back the next day. Whereas other cities are a little more flexible or have more hours of operations allowed or permitted.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, this is Tom Marshall again. I'd say, I mean, this is a difficult place for contractors to do business. Palo Alto, there's just a lot of additional work that has to go into on their side on customer notifications and work hours and all the additional requirements we have in the community to try to inform and work with the community, and it costs the contractors money and they find it difficult to work here.
And Councilmember Cormack, I assume council's aware of these conditions.
We are, and community engagement is a pretty foundational principle. So, and we certainly have a lot of concerns about noise in the community, which we heard at our priority. So, yeah, it is an expectation the community has that things will be done in restricted hours and in a fashion that provides a lot of communication. And we didn't even get into how many times the water truck has to lay down the dust and all of that. So yeah, not unaware.
May I ask one more question? I'm just curious, for those who served on the budget subcommittee this year, any particular insights, issues that we haven't already talked about that came up in the subcommittee process? Commissioner Scharf or Commissioner Smith, did you want to throw anything out there?
I actually don't really have any insights or thoughts that we haven't discussed. I mean, I think everyone's been pretty comprehensive.
And for me,
I guess I have one thing I want to say. I did think that that Councilmember Cormack's discussion earlier was on point about the reapproach, the projects that roll over, and that is the way we should look at it. She's absolutely correct on that.
And I think from my perspective, the only thing, and we've talked about this in the past at length, I think, but it was never put on the agenda, is the notion, and I think the reason why it's not on our agenda is because it's dealt with in another community group, and that is the working hours in the city of Palo Alto, working on our permitting process as well as our construction hours, and actually making it more appealing to work here. I think this last came up during our discussion on getting contractors to bid for fiber distribution. It's electrical and gas and water are the exact same contractors. So if we can find some way, perhaps to provide some temporary relief to the working hours, or provide community engagement or policing of areas where they're working in the early hours, or a rolling, if you will, permitting process, dependent upon where they're working. I mean, there's a lot of ideas that I think that we should explore if we are facing a contractor community that, quite frankly, just doesn't want to work here. That's a problem. And what we've been highlighting about these rolling capital budgets, they'll just get bigger because contractors will just continue to refuse to work. With respect to staffing and salaries, I'm in the real estate development business, and I can tell you it is extremely competitive right now. Salary rates are very high. Very high. So it's hard. It just is. It's hard. It's hard to live here. It's hard to find talent, and it's hard to keep them.
Thank you. Council Member Cormack.
Commissioner Metz, you still had your light on? No, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Siegel. Okay, so we've had this problem in electric engineering and operations the whole time I've been on council. It's year 4, and I know Commissioner Sharp and others have many more years of experience than I do. Feels though we're getting to a critical point because those are enormous vacancy numbers. I'm intrigued by the bullet point employee and subsidized housing. And I'd be interested in understanding a little bit more about, separate from just, sort of quote, throwing money at the problem by increasing salaries. Is that really what it would take, not to make this problem go away, but to make it less perpetual? And while you're thinking about that, I'm thinking about it in the context of the whole community, right? People always talk about, teachers and firefighters and nurses. This is pretty crucial. So thoughts on what it would take to get the electric vacancy numbers to a place that would be sustainable. We're in the idea generation stage. I mean, I realize we're all on TV, but, this is, let's be clear about what's going on here, right? We've just spent a lot of time, walking through the numbers and understanding what we cannot get done collectively. And we're about to ask you to do something harder than we've ever done before, which is modernize the entire grid. Plus, we've got all this other stuff. So, starting to get a little concerned. Don't want to lose any of you.
So Commissioner or Councilmember Cormack, I think that, one of that last bullet that we put in there, talking to some of the folks that have left, as well as some of the staff members that are still here, housing is a huge issue for them. And then in some of these critical positions in Tom's group in the operational side, we want to respond to this outage. Well, now our people are 2 hours out, 2.5 hours out. Well, by the time you get them and they actually start to mobilize, that outage is probably going to be now 3 hours by the time we actually get a truck to roll to that, even the folks that are on call. Now, it's not so bad on the water, gas, wastewater side. We have some first responders. We do have some language in the contract portion where they have to live within the period of time. But we don't have that, so much into the electric side.
So quick question about the housing then, because sometimes the housing is someone wants to live somewhere else, but they want housing for while they're here, right? If they're doing, 3 12-hour shifts or whatever. Is it that kind of housing, or is it like they and their families would love to live in Palo Alto?
I think that they would love to live in Palo Alto, but I also think that they would like to be within a 30-minute to a 45-minute commute time. So it's a subsidized.
So
housing.
subsidized.
So it's almost like
Like an
a
allowance.
stipend.
Yeah.
That it's wage plus stipend for cost of living. Matter of fact, today we had final interviews for the AD position, and the one gentleman asked about the cost of living, and we asked if he had done his homework. He said he did. And even with the salary that's advertised, he says, I'm not sure if I can really come to Palo Alto, live in proper, but he says I can probably find a place somewhere on the peninsula and be somewhat closer. But it was an issue that one of the questions that he asked City Manager Shikata and myself, who were on the panel today. And then he asked the question, is there any subsidized housing cost? And we've talked a little bit about this, that, as you start to come in, you come in probably more at the lower level portion of it. So is that subsidized up here? And then as you move in your steps, do you get less than at that period of time? At least you're establishing yourself, but maybe it's not a fixed number all the time, but maybe that fixed number drops as you increase your salary range. So that was one of our thoughts. And then it's pretty much a cost of living.
And do any
not cost of
other
living.
utilities nearby offer that benefit that we're aware of?
So PG&E does.
Well, then that was the next, that was, the elephant in the room I was about to say, and I'm sure my commissioners are aware of this, but it's not like PG&E isn't trying to do a ton of work as well. So we're all chasing, a small number of people. So we got two problems. We have to get some of those people for us, and problem two, just so we all get to where we want to get, we need to broaden that pool.
And so PG&E does give us subsidized. It's up to $4,000
per month.
For the folks that are in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Folks that are on the outline areas, they don't get that subsidization, but it's just on the peninsula side. I don't know if it stretches into San Jose or not, but.
Okay. So I really appreciate this, and I hope the commissioners don't think this is a digression. Whenever this comes in whatever format to finance or council or UAC or what have you, I'd be very interested in understanding the impact on rates of doing what is necessary to fix these electric numbers, both engineering and operations, because that's an enormous premium we're paying, for the hotline group. Great. I'm thrilled they're there, because absent that, we have a bigger problem than we already have. But I think in the same way that we've asked you to come forward with, tell us what you need in order to do the modernization, I do feel we're at an inflection point now, and this problem is not going to get better. And you guys have done an admirable job of managing it to date. But we're not going to be able to, literally keep the lights on, plus make all the changes that we've just reviewed if we don't have enough people on the team. So I'd be very interested in understanding the impact on rates, and hopefully the way the math works, it's not enormous. And then any other creative ideas you have, because this is important, and part of our job is making sure that everybody else out there enjoying their evening, can do that without worrying too much. And now I'm starting to worry, and I know that Director Batchelor knows that's a bad thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Scharf, then Commissioner Smith, and then Commissioner Bowie.
So I think, Councilmember Cormack, that was a really good discussion on the housing options. I do think that there's a lot more we could do. I mean, I think that we have to figure out why people aren't coming. And I don't think, number one, I don't think we pay competitively with Santa Clara. We should pay more than Santa Clara. I think that's something we should do if we're really serious about this. And then in terms of the housing options, I think it's going to be different for different people. I mean, I think the first thing the city could do is buy an apartment complex. And then we would have places where there are going to be some people that need long-term housing, some people that need short-term housing. And frankly, apartments are going to be a good investment for the city long-term. I think we don't even have to buy them in Palo Alto. We could buy some in Mountain View. We could buy some in Redwood City. We could buy, I think things like that would actually work. I also think we could do some sort of equity sharing type program like we do for the city manager, where we provide some loans at, one of the advantages cities have is they can actually borrow money at a fairly low rate. And if there was some equity sharing type concept, we'd actually probably make money on it like we do every time we do the city manager's house. So I do think if we really focused on it, we could come up with things that would make us really attractive to live in and would get people into the housing close by. I just think it's going to take a sustained focus, and we can do it. We're just going to have to really focus on what are the impediments, and different people are going to have different needs. I mean, some people are going to want to have a big single family house, so they're going to want to live far away, but when they're working, they're wanting to have a place to stay. Other people are going to want to raise their family in this area and have, not that big single family house. So I think we could do it. I just think it would take more than a discussion at the UAC or at council. It would take staff basically being tasked with what are the options here? What could we come up with? And break it down upon what are the different types of things people would need. And I think that would be a fairly large undertaking. I also think you're going to have some issues with limiting it to utilities. I think you're going to have issues about equity around the whole organization. And so I think there are large issues that start to come in. And I think that's part of the problem with utilities is how do we deal with utilities as part of the whole city, but also somewhat separately given their role in the community and how critical and how difficult it is often to hire for these positions. So I just wanted to add that in because I think it is a really important, and it's been an issue that's been building at least since I started on council in 2010. So, I do think it's only getting worse. So I think that if we get ahead of this at some point, I think that's really important. Thanks.
Thanks. Commissioner Smith.
Plus one to a couple of things that Commissioner Scharf highlighted. And number one, I personally believe that we should be paying higher salaries than all of the communities in the Bay Area. It's expensive to live in Palo Alto, and I've lived here for 5 years. It's astounding. I do think, echoing one of his last statements, was it's a lot better. It's a lot bigger than just utilities. It affects everybody. It is police. It is teachers. It is everybody. So if we're going to make a policy of providing loans or subsidies or apartment building, which I think is a great idea, the federal government does that for their foreign service all over the planet. So why can't we do it in Palo Alto for the other communities? That's a great idea. And we would probably make money just simply by the investment. We do need to be creative. I think on the contracting side, I heard Dave, I think you highlighted this, that you are experimenting with design build. That's interesting. It's expensive. Design build was not ever formulated to be the cheapest possible solution, but what it does is it incentivizes the contractors to participate, primarily because they own the design, they own the control. Depending upon how you contract it, you can sit back as program manager and as the engineer, if you will, and certify the design. But the nice thing about approaching it from the perspective of design build is you're giving them a little more say in the process and a little more determination in their future, which I think you may find them very interested in participating. There's a little bit of a risk, obviously, that the city would have to take on board, but provided we are very targeted in terms of the design build opportunities, I think we can manage that risk quite well. And then finally, I do think, and I recognize having remembered the conversation, I do recognize that it's not our UAC committee that needs to address this, but we've brought the building department head to the UAC in the past. There is a greater conversation to be had with respect to, we've talked about solar permitting, we've talked about electrical permitting, we've talked about working hours. Perhaps we put together a team, a focus group, if you will, across a couple of the commissions, just to focus in on some of these really just fundamental things like working hours. Is 8 to 5 the right working hours? Or because traffic is a nightmare and it will soon be a greater nightmare as more people go back to work, maybe we should start opening up selected streets and selected major arteries in working hours at 6 a.m. because
Commissioner Smith, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just am a little bit sensitive to how far off the agenda this
Yeah, no worries. I reflect that. I'm just responding to Council Members McCormack's request for thinking out of the box, if you will. So if you'll indulge me for just one final point, I'd appreciate that, Chair. I do think it will require a little bit of creative thinking with respect to how we allow contractors to work within the city of Palo Alto, and perhaps it comes at a certain amount of pain for the Palo Alto population. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Bowie?
Yeah, so I'll keep mine brief because a lot of it is just sort of, I would echo a lot of the points that were said here, but sort of in the spirit of the creative thinking through particularly the staff problem. I just think that the one idea that Commissioner Smith just put forth there was a working group. And I think that this question could also be kind of put into an ad hoc process, just to think through more broadly what could be done. And I would raise my hand if such a thing were going on. So it would echo all these points that were made throughout, but that's what I would add to it. I think, there's a consideration to maybe spin off an ad hoc group to discuss this problem.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just, sort of ditto to so much of what's been said already, and just to really underscore, if we're losing high-level positions because of salary to other local utilities, that's something we should be able to address faster than a lot of these other issues. Okay, well, with that, thank you for everyone's participation in this really robust conversation. Thank you, Councilmember Cormack, for your insights. Very helpful. At this point, I think we're right. So I'm going to ask if anyone wants to move to approve the staff recommendations. There are two, but they're related to recommend that council approve the proposed 2023 utilities operating budget, and that we recommend that council approve the proposed 2023 utilities capital budget. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second. Thank you. We can do a roll call. Vice Chair Johnson.
Approve.
Commissioner Scharf.
Approve.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Bowie.
Approve.
Commissioner Metz.
Approve.
Commissioner Forcell. Approve. And I approve as well. So thank you. And with that, we can move on to the next item on the budget, which is on the agenda, which is any commissioner comments and reports from any meetings or events. Okay, I don't see any hands. So now we can turn to future topics for upcoming meetings. Any thoughts there? I think we're all talked out. I had one, which was just an informational report on how the cross-border project is going. I don't think we've gotten an update for a while. Great. I think with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move, we adjourn.
I'll second.
And I think we can all wave goodbye, even though we're. Thank you, everyone. It was really, really good conversation.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.